It is 8:30. I'll go ahead and call this morning's meeting of the Clay County Board of Commissioners to order. The first item on the agenda today is an approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion to approve the agenda from Commissioner Gross, a second from Commissioner Campbell. Further discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Citizens to be heard. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the county board on anything that is not on the agenda? Any citizens to be heard? Steve, have you had any requests to speak in this area?
If not, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The next item is the payment of bills and vouchers.
Move for approval.
Motion to approve the payments from Commissioner Ebinger. Second from Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Madam Chair, we didn't approve the bills and vouchers.
I think that was it.
That was bills and vouchers, yes.
That was bills and vouchers.
Yeah.
Yes, this one was built.
Now we're moving to minutes.
So for clarification, that's just, we did have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you. Thanks for catching, Colleen. I appreciate that. September 13th minutes.
Move for approval.
A motion offered from Commissioner Ebinger to approve the minutes from September 13th. A second from Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Item 2 this morning is a request to adopt Resolution 2022-27 to support Operation Greenlight for veterans. Our Veteran Service Officer, Kurt Cannon, is with us today. Good morning, Kurt.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Operation Greenlight is a week sort of November 7th through the 13th where we've done the blue light in Clay County for the police.
Yeah.
Green lights for veterans for that week. Put on by the National Association for Veteran Service Officers. They're starting the drive, so they've put it out to every county, participate or not. So thought it'd be worthwhile to get this resolution. There is a media article that I'm going to do and put it in our newsletter here at the county. So
Okay. Would you mind if I just read the brief description in the memo? I think that's helpful for people watching. This coming Veterans Day, the National Association of Counties and the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers invite the nation's 3,069 counties, parishes, and boroughs to join Operation Greenlight and show support for veterans by lighting our buildings green from November 7th through November 13th. By shining a green light, county governments and our residents will let our veterans know that they're seen, appreciated, and supported. Have we coordinated with downstairs to make sure there's something we can put over the lights?
We've spoke with Brian Frederickson. He is going to be making that adjustment.
Okay, great. Yes.
I'd move the resolution.
Second.
Motion to approve Resolution 2022-27 offered from Commissioner Campbell, a second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? Kurt, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. We appreciate it. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The resolution is carried. Thank you.
see you next week.
3 this morning is a request to fill a vacancy for office support specialist in social services. We have our social service director, Rhonda Porter, this morning.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I am here this morning to request replacement of an office support specialist that's been serving at our front reception in our income maintenance unit. Our exiting employee was stole by Lori
Hey, Rhonda, your mic is off.
Oh, start all over?
It'd be
I
helpful.
can repeat that.
Any questions? So just for people that might not have heard that, the previous position was budgeted at a grade 8, step 5. You're anticipating a grade 8 between steps 1 and 2. And then this is a position that you receive a 50% reimbursement from the federal participation.
Correct.
Okay, questions from the board?
Move approval.
Motion
Second.
from Commissioner Campbell to approve the request. Commissioner Campbell also asking for a backfill if.
Yes, that's meets
The motion would reflect that. There's a second from Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
All right.
Thank you very much. Item 4, an approval of funding from the capital improvement bond for the Comstock shop mitigation process. We have our highway engineer, Justin Sorum, today, as well as our facilities director, Joe Olson. Good morning.
Good morning. So during the site work process out at Comstock, building the new shop, excavators had found some diesel under the ground. And so what had happened is the project had kind of came to a halt, and we ended up calling in Braun Intertech to investigate this and see how much diesel and what the process would be to clean this up. So what had happened is they had done some testing and found that one of the situations we were trying to figure out is how do we keep the project moving forward, and the most economical way was to put in what's called a vapor barrier system. And basically we had to haul in some special rock, put some piping down and like a large tarp that goes over it. And this was the most economical way, but yet we could still allow us to build the building this spring. So what had happened is that with we had hired Braun Intertech, J-Tech Mechanical, and Fitzgerald, and between the three, the costs started to become significant. So I'd asked them to give me some rough numbers since this is kind of real time, and we've come up with Braun Intertech has an estimate of $30,000. That's the testing. They have to come back in the fall and in the wintertime and do some testing.
Yep, they have to core into the actual concrete in the building once it's built too, to see if there is any vapors coming up.
Yep, so that's part of their cost. And then the vapor barrier system itself, we worked with our plumbers that were on site because a lot of it tied into what we were doing anyways. And then Fitzgerald was our excavator. So between the three, we have a rough estimate of $60,000. And so we talked to the building committee, and we looked at two different funds to fund this, and one was through Fund 19, which is our capital improvement fund, and then the other one was do we keep it within the bond? And the building committee and us felt that this would be appropriate to keep it within the bond. So we have rough numbers of $60,000, and we're asking to fund it out of that one.
Okay, Commissioner Campbell?
Madam Chair, this is, and Board Member, this is one of those issues where sometimes something is found on a project and the delays to come before us can be costly in terms of waiting. That Joe went ahead on some of this stuff and did some of it, realizing that if need be, it could have come out of Fund 19.
Right.
And but after talking with our capital improvement committee, we felt that because there were still, I think, $230-some thousand left in the capital improvement fund, that this would be an appropriate expenditure to come out of those remaining funds. So most of the work is done already. So it just becomes a matter of if we elect to take the funds from the capital improvement fund as opposed to a line item on a budgeted line item on his budget.
Yeah.
And the recommendation from our capital improvement committee was to take it out of the capital improvement fund.
Yeah, and then we are going to be applying for through a petrol fund reimbursement, and it's one of those, we did this through the jail, and it's not, we're hopeful it'll give you some, but it doesn't cover everything. So it's a long process, but we plan on doing that, hopes to get some reimbursement back on this. So.
Okay, further questions from the board?
I would move that these funds be taken out of the capital improvement fund.
We have a motion offered from Commissioner Campbell to pay for the diesel mitigation out of the capital improvement fund, not to exceed 60,000. We have a second from Commissioner Gross. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 today is the review and approval of the 5-year plan with an amended 2023 construction plan. Our highway engineer, Justin Sorum, good morning. You also did pass out both sets, not
Yep.
the one from April, but also the new.
So the one in April is, the only update I've done since April is just put in actual prices that we saw this year, just to, so it's current. But everything else on the one that has the 419 in the bottom right-hand corner is what the 5-year plan was approved this spring.
Okay.
And then the second one I gave you with 9/27/2022. So through the highway committee, I was asked to kind of update the 5-year plan. And in doing so, I created engineer's estimates for every single project within the 5-year plan. Let me see, I was gonna show you. So each project within the 5-year plan has an engineer's estimate tied to it that's all in Excel. And one thing it also has is a 10% contingency attached to it. That's something that we were asked to do in highway committee, and I think it's a good idea because if a paving project goes perfect and the contractor hits all of their density incentives, it's already 5% over. Because that is the maximum incentive that they can hit. Unless you want me to, I don't think there's much value in going through each project line by line as we have done that in the past, but it is concerning when you look at the updated pricing, when you look at the final year, it's $11 million in the hole compared to being ahead 55,000.
Right.
So I did also, the single sheet that I handed out is just the 2023 proposed amended construction. I do think it's a good idea to get this approved today, just so we know what we're gonna be doing in 2023. So I did highlight project number 1, which is the paving on CASA 1. With the late construction that we're seeing now, there's the potential that that contract will still be open in the spring, just because seeding won't take off. There will be a punch list, and we won't be able to open a paving project until that contract is closed. So I just highlighted that one in case that one doesn't go next year, but the other 2 through 6 is what I'm proposing for 2023 construction. The Comstock urban reconstruction, the mill and overlay and FDR or cold in place recycling on CASA 18, the radius reconstruction in Glendon, the mill and overlay on CASA 26, and then the mill and overlay on CASA 19. That goes into April.
So do you want to maybe to highlight a little bit what we're changing in what you
Yeah, so-
previously had anticipated construction? I know that it looks like the bridge replacement components.
Being that there wasn't a bonding bill, I just took the bridge replacements off of there because we already know that we're not gonna get funding for those 3 projects that I had. The other project that slid was CASA 3, so that goes from American Crystal north to Wall Street. So we are tying that project in with the city. They didn't get funding for their levy project, so that project just made sense to slide.
Right.
The other project is CASA 34, so that is from the east limits of Ulen to the East County line. And then County Road 75, which is basically the road that goes into Northern's Pit. I slid that project as well, as we're doing some ongoing testing on that still.
And I think it's important for people watching to understand that we're sliding it to another year in the 5-year plan.
Correct.
So we still say there's a need, we understand that. it's a way for us to shuffleboard the components and who's paying for what, and
Exactly.
and to reduce the local payment as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to maybe talk about the Comstock Urban Reconstruct, because the local funding is 3 million? That's the project in partnership with the diversion.
Yep, so we hired Ulteg to design that. So the Diversion Authority is paying for the entire construction cost in Comstock. I've gone to a couple city council meetings. We're just kind of addressing some of the comments they had, and I plan to go back next month and hopefully get final approval to move forward on that project.
So my question on that piece is, because it goes all the way to Trunk Highway 75, how do you do construction to that area when you know there's gonna be an up and over that'll have to get,
Up and over is west of 75, so that gets addressed.
okay, so it'll stay low
Yep.
to 75, I got you.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm a mile ahead of myself.
No, later in the 5-year plan, we're actually, as part of the up and over, the diversion will take care of from 75 to the up and over, and then
Okay.
the following year will go from their touchdown point all the way to the Red River.
Okay, so we're not touching things that will have to be.
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Further questions?
Another point of note too, that's not on the 5-year plan at all, and it deals with Highway 75 North, and that's up in the Georgetown area. That is still also a plan that will be the financial responsibility of the Diversion Authority.
That's
I think
correct.
that number was estimated at one point in time to be $3 million. I would assume that number is
Probably inflated.
probably more like 5 now, I suppose, but.
Yeah, because there is, on Highway 75, there's 2 points, and then there is one on CASA 34 and one on County Road 100 as well.
But that could very well be done within the 5-year time frame that we're talking about. We just
Yep.
don't have it listed, but it's no financial impact to our plan.
No.
Okay.
And just kind of
Commissioner
I mean-
Ebinger does have a question, if you want to.
one thing of note in kind of building the 5-year plan the way I did this go around, if prices do go up or down, all of these engineers' estimates are tied to my spreadsheet where it can easily be adjusted if we see prices that are lower, hopefully, than what I'm estimating now. And then also this winter, we are in a position where the projects that we did slide, 34 for example, if we do see favorable prices and it looks like we can afford the project, the plans will be sitting there ready to bid if prices come in well.
Any other questions?
Well, and when you look at this, when you.
If I might, Commissioner
Oh,
Ebinger
I'm
did
sorry.
have a comment
No,
earlier.
sorry.
Well, you answered the first question I had, is are we flexible to bring these projects back?
Yep,
Okay, the 3 bridges, that is strictly a function of a lack of a bonding bill?
that's correct.
So if the legislature addresses that deficiency, they're back on the
Yep,
lineup?
and only one of the projects that slid had state aid funding, and that was at 75,000, so the impacts would be pretty minimal. The other 2 are on county roads, so they're only $10,000 apiece county funding, so wouldn't have a major impact if there were to be a bonding bill. And actually, those 3 projects are signed, just waiting for funding. So the plans are completely done and all the permits are acquired.
Excellent, and I appreciate a lot of work and thought has gone into this, and I appreciate you and your staff's energy being directed on this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, this was really good work, and it was needed, it needed to be done. And a prime example of that is when you look at the balance as of 1/1/24, back in April of 19th, the state aid municipal account, we would have had to draw $1,027,000, which is well within our ability to do with the state.
Yep.
Under the current numbers, that number would have been $8,500,000.
Right.
At the end of the same period of time. That's $7.5 million difference. Under the current plan, without amending this, we would not even be able to do that because the state would never allow us to advance that kind of money. So it has to be amended based on current construction costs, and it's unfortunate, and at some point in time, we're gonna have to determine how we're gonna, I mean, this pushback this 1 year, That might have to, everything. in
Absolutely.
Future years might also have to go back, but for now, until we can get a handle and maybe things will settle down
Yeah,
on these increases, but that's just a perfect example of why we have to do it.
and kind of one thing through my budget process that one of the reasons I increased my consulting budget is to make sure that we are getting enough testing on these roads that are in the 5-year plan to make sure we don't significantly impact a project by sliding it.
Right, right. Yeah, well, that's good work. I agree. That's good work. Madam Chair, I would move the amended 5-year construction plan.
We have a motion to approve the amended construction plan from Commissioner Campbell,
Second.
a second from Commissioner Emminger. I know this is a popular topic, but the North Broadway Bridge, I know we have it as a placeholder in this plan, but there's a lot of studying and grant
Absolutely.
funding to find, but for people that may be watching, that's an important one for a lot of people, so it is in there, but
And just, I
Yep.
guess, an update on that one, I did get my first set of preliminary plans for the removal of that project. So sometime this fall, we will be seeking approval to advertise and open bids for that.
thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you.
We are a little early before our public hearing. Would it be possible to do some committee reports? Somebody ready? Anybody ready? Okay, Commissioner Ebbinger, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On Wednesday, the 21st, I attended virtually the Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting. But usually it's pretty dry stuff. It was livened up a little when Commissioner Pepcorn asked, when will Minnesota start participating in funding of the project? I was gratified by the many responses. I think Commissioner Campbell can put this in a better perspective because of his knowledge of the history of the development on this, but the executive director, Joel Paulson, said Fargo does its own in-town work and is reimbursed by the Diversion Authority. Hence, there's a record of this from the Diversion Authority. Moorhead does the same in-town work and uses Minnesota bond dollars, so no record or cost to the Diversion Authority is indicated in those records. Chad Peterson, Cass County Commissioner, pointed out that Minnesota state funds can't be used for North Dakota projects. Hence, they've been directly from the state of Minnesota to the contractors who are doing the work in Minnesota. John Shockley, the attorney for the Diversion Authority, said Minnesota bond money can only be spent in Minnesota in doing these projects. And Minnesota is participating in the comprehensive plan for the diversion and meeting the requirements of that. Mayor Carlson pointed out that Moorhead had started spending funds towards the diversion in 2010, well before the 2016 Joint Powers Agreement. And Mayor Mahoney, Fargo Mayor Mahoney, concurred with that and said Minnesota has met their commitments to the comprehensive plan. To that, Commissioner Pipcorn did acknowledge he appreciated the discussion and he had brought it up in order to inform the public of how that works.
If I might, really quick. Sure. I was fortunate to have been appointed to the governor's task force that Governor Burgum and Governor Dayton brought together so that both sides of the river could come up with a solution. And if Mr. Pepcorn would like to review the video from that, at one point when Governor Dayton turned to Governor Burgum and said, well, Minnesota has paid over $100 million for flood mitigation on the Minnesota side, and that will go towards our portion, even though we're not paying directly North Dakota funds. And that was shook on from both governors, North Dakota and Minnesota. So Sometimes history can fleet the memory, but just a reminder to Mr. Pepcorn that that was the agreement.
I was glad to see, and that's valid too. I'm sure he appreciates the public receiving that additional information. And I was glad to see the unified approach from everybody involved that Minnesota is meeting its obligations on that. And directly after that conversation, my computer crashed, so I missed about 10 minutes of the meeting, but came back. There had been a discussion of the cash budget and a contract that dealt with Schmidt and Sons getting $794,000 for a demolition project that really is kind of interesting. They came in lower, and it was desirable to have this happen. It's a demolition of 10 structures, or 10 properties, and they recycle the properties. The homes are moved and used, and some of the other buildings that come down are reused. They came in lower because they actually make some money doing it that way that impacts on their bottom line cost, and it's much more environmentally sound. So that was something we recommended, and subsequently the next day the board approved. Later that night, I attended the Lake Agassiz Regional Library System Board meeting. We voted on a number of submissions on reports to the state of Minnesota dealing with regional library telecommunications. We changed, we passed a 3-year contract with Brady Marks to do our auditing. Later, let's see. On the 23rd, I met with Commissioner Cayley, Rory Beal, Clay County Public Health, Chancellor Essling of Essentia Health, Deb White, Morehead City Council member, and Representative Heather Keeley, along with Kyle Christensen with the Lotus Project. We discussed opioid settlement money in Clay County and some of the needs that exist right now. A lot of our needs are being met by Cass Fargo Public Health, and we discussed some of the ways that could be addressed. Let me see. I've got to go back. On Thursday, 22nd, I attended the Diversion Authority Board. We've had a number of awards come for the diversion project. John Shockley received Legal Advisor of the Year Award, Joel Paulson Leader of the Year Award, and Shakuan Binyu, which is part of the 3P partnership we have, is nominated for the Best Utility Project of the Year. We had a couple of discussions. They approved the demo project I mentioned earlier, and there's discussion on the executive director contract. And that completes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Ebinger. Kathy, do you have to set up anything PowerPoint for yours?
Maybe, well, if we can, Madam Chair, while we've got 1 minute for the public hearing to start, I just want to follow up on Commissioner Ebinger's comments regarding the Minnesota funding on the diversion project. And you know, when that project first started, the funding was more related to the channel itself and the control structures that were needed. There became a point in time when it was decided that all in-town levies and levy work was to become part of the diversion project. And at that point in time, then the city of Fargo started getting reimbursed for all of their in-town levy work from the diversion authority through the sales taxes and all those things. On the Minnesota side, Dave is exactly right that those dollars came from state bonding, and there's a lot of money. And not to mention, it's not finished yet on the Minnesota side. Morehead still probably has, I think, about $15 million to complete its work for in-town levies on the Morehead side. Those monies will need to come from, and I believe they were in the bonding bill last year, but the bonding bill never happened. It was never passed, or signed, or whatever, never passed. So, and then you look at just straight north in Oakport Township, where I'm from, that project was roughly $30-some million that was paid for by the state of Minnesota and DNR, that in today's formula would have qualified as Minnesota money invested into the overall flood protection project. So Minnesota is doing its share. I don't think, in fairness, Minnesota isn't done yet, just like North Dakota isn't done yet. But it's a process that is being done, and I think our local legislatures at the state level have been, in the past, very influential in making sure that happened. So I just wanted to follow up and concur with Commissioner Ebinger's comments.
Commissioner Campbell, did you say 15 or 50 million?
Well, I think there's probably close to 50 million left.
Okay.
But I believe in the last bonding bill, the request was for 15 of that 50.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now at 9 o'clock, so we can do the public hearing to enact the Ordinance 2022-4. Public Health Director Kathy McKay, would you like to come up? And our Environmental Health Specialist Kent Severson. This is regarding amending the Clay County Food Protection Ordinance, which is why the numbers are off a little bit. Right?
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, this is just
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I do need a motion to open the public hearing.
Move to open public hearing.
A motion to open the public hearing from Commissioner Kaylee.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. We're open now, Kathy, sorry.
Okay, thank you. This is just an updated ordinance, so it is not new. Most of our ordinances, maybe all of them in the past, have been adopted by reference for the state ordinances, but this one is different, and Kent can just talk about a couple of the changes, the updates.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, yes, every delegated agency in the state has gone through an evaluation this past year, and looking over our ordinances, there was a change to the state food code when they adopted the new updated FDA food code. And so trickling on down to us at the delegated levels, they need to make sure that we're all have the same language within our ordinances. And that's what this is today, is updating things so that they match up with the new statute number references and so forth within our ordinance so that they match everyone else's.
Okay. Any further questions on this or comments on this? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this public hearing? Any members of the public? Steve, have you had any correspondence requests?
I have not, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions on this component? Board? Yes, Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. The area where there's, I think the one area where we're changing some standards, right? Is there, did I read that correctly in here, where there's some new standards that are involved? And I think there's something about new standards, and it deals with kitchen sinks and that type of thing.
Yeah, not,
I read this, and it's been a little while since I read it, but
oh, with the plumbing code, yeah. Yep, some updates with like that one that you're referencing there with the plumbing code and some standards for that. Again, it's making sure that all of our language is identical to everyone else's.
So will all of our entities then have to potentially make changes to their, okay.
Just, things like this that are changes that are happening in real time, basically will be from here on forward with new projects, new plan reviews, that kind of thing.
So existing establishments, and I think of some of our small restaurants and those things that have really had some financial impacts over the last couple of years, and for us to start to go in there and say, well, you need to modify this and this and this right now, I don't know that would Obviously, it's the best interest through public safety. But basically, you're saying those establishments would be grandfathered in. Is that what you're saying?
We'd be careful to not use that phrase, but yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Going forward from here, no existing restaurants should expect any changes stemming from the changes that we're doing today. So,
And I'm not suggesting if it's needed, that is a bad thing.
Right.
But I don't know if any of them would be aware of the requirement. And so it's more of a, how many of them were notified of what you're bringing this forward?
and that is a great question, so appreciate you asking.
Okay.
Any further questions on this? A motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion offered from Commissioner Ebinger to close the public hearing. Second from Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. There is a requested action.
I'll move that we adopt the new ordinance.
Motion offered from Commissioner Gross to adopt ordinance 2022-4.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Kaylee. Are the numbers correct? Good?
Low.
I just want to clarify, because we just adopted 2022-27, so I want to make sure. It's an ordinance, that's why it's different, so we're good. 2022-4. We had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The request is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your work on it. Item 7, a discussion and approval to enter into contract negotiations for construction management services for a substance use crisis facility. We have our County Administrator Steve
to the audio
Larson,
center.
our
Please enter a
Substance Crisis
conference
Facility
ID
Director Troy
followed by
Amundson, and
pound.
Public Health Director Kathy McKay. I think we're waiting on a phone. The architect, Klein McCarthy.
Yes, I believe Scott Fettig is also now on the line. Thank you,
Can
Madam.
we double check that Scott's,
Now joining the meeting.
Scott, are you signed in?
I'm trying to.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
All right,
Just keeps saying it's waiting to accept me.
I think we've got you accepted now. We had to wait to get to a computer because someone was presenting. So now we're good. We just need to fix the feedback on the one. Okay.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. As this board recalls, on September 12th and 13th, an interview committee conducted 3 interviews of our top construction management responses to requests for qualifications in regards to the substance use crisis facility. As a part of that review, each of the members provided a score. At the end of that process, those score sheets were collected and did tally all those different votes. At the end of that process, there was also a discussion how the fees, part of that presentation asked that each of the organization provided their fee schedule, and each company provided their fee schedule in a little bit of a different way for construction management at risk services. And so we were asked to bring forward a document that showed that. So I got together with Lori, with Joe Olson, and also had feedback from Scott Fettig in regards to interpretation of that. And you each have a handout before you that shows, number one, I think the first side shows out the total scores for the 3 different agencies. It provides a deviation from the average of the scores, and then it also lays out the first place votes for each of the agencies that interviewed. And so on the backside of that, we also then have the layout of the CMAR fee schedule comparison. I think it's important to understand, in order to go apples to apples, and talking with Mr. Fettig, what we did do is try to put everything on an average, on an equal playing field. And so the position is that this information is based on a 14-month construction process, and it's also based on a $11.5 million owner construction piece. Now, again, that doesn't include the soft costs, but the construction portion of what their fee schedule, each of these agencies' fee schedule will be based off of. And so in looking back at the first page, the total scores, you can see from the 10 scores, the average score had Gertz Construction at 120. It had Construction Engineers at 908, and it had McGough at 850.
You said 120.
I say 120
so
for the
let's
first one,
just-
excuse me, 920 for Gertz, 908 for Construction Engineers, and 850 for McGough Construction. As I mentioned, the deviations of the scores are listed below that. That's important just from the standpoint of, you can see where the average scores were at, and if there's any fluctuation from that average, that certainly has an impact on the overall average. If you look at the first place votes, Gertz Construction received 3 first place votes. Construction Engineers received 5 first place votes, and we had 2 of our scores that had a tie with both Gertz and Construction Engineers. Are there any questions on the scoring piece?
Questions for?
All right, again, if we look at the CMAR fee schedule comparison, again, this is based on $11.5 million estimate on the project. It's based on a 14-month construction project. Again, with the idea of giving us an apples-to-apples comparison. The construction engineers came at a total construction and personnel costs of $1,240,000, with an insurance, additional liability insurance of $201,250. McGough was at $1,166,700, with an additional two insurance pieces of $109,250 and $74,750. And Gertz Construction came out at $1,021,000 with a lump sum insurance of $150,000. And so if you look at the bottom of that, we've broken that down based on a 14-month construction period. The average monthly cost for personnel in this project is $59,000 for construction engineers, for a total cost of that $826,000. For McGough, it would be $53,547 per month. And then for Gertz Construction, it would be $46,500 per month for $651,000. So any questions on that fee schedule?
No question. I know a lot of work went into that because we didn't have the back sheet when we were doing those interviews on the 12th and 13th. We just got the proposals from the companies, and I know some companies had different months, and so to make sure that we're doing the most apples to apples, I appreciate that. But questions on the breakdown?
So I think that at the end of our meetings were considered open meetings because we had the full board. There was some discussion. This information was asked for to be brought forward for the board session today. Again, I think the important thing to remember from
I was trying to just log in and watch the beginning, and then they went, Scott, are you trying to log
Hey,
in?
Scott, your microphone's on.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
And so just wanted to qualify that the the request before this board is a request for qualifications. Very often when we are going through the process of any type of spending from a board perspective, we're looking at generally the cost, our procurement piece. When it comes to a request for qualifications, that's part of it. The process that we've taken as the board on the RFQ process for our projects is there's a breakdown of essentially fees are about 20%. We put them at 20% of the total points available for the project. And so with that, I would yield for any questions.
Thank you. Well, as noted, we did full board interviews of the three and included not only the panelists part here, but Joe Olson was part of those discussions as well. But I think there's a pretty clear breakdown in different areas between the three, but certainly want the board to be able to express their preference or questions now. Commissioner Kaylee.
So just to start with this fee schedule comparison, this is with Gertz Construction as CMAR and not CMA, correct?
That's correct.
And as a clarification, during their presentation, they said they could do either. Yep. Did you have any questions on the?
Maybe just a follow-up to that then would be to start the discussion, if, however we go, are we only considering CMAR or are we considering CMA still as a possibility for Gertz Construction if that were to be selected?
I think that's a very valid question. I think certainly, maybe have the whole board's point of view. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but I think in terms of this component, it needs to be as much apples to apples as possible. And so I think we look at, certainly are tasked with looking at the fee comparisons and score comparisons and presentations.
And I think to note, to maybe just follow up, part of this board's request when it came down, the initial RFQ requested CM at risk and then CM agency. When the letters went out for the interview, the letter read that the preference of this board was based on your actions, is that they were looking for fee schedules pertaining to CM at risk. And so.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sorry, Commissioner Campbell.
I'm going to start with the total scores. It seems to me that there's one score in these 10 that have really changed the dynamics of what the totals would be. We have one getting 100, a perfect score, and another one getting 71. I mean, at 71, that low score is 15 points lower than any other low score. And the highest score is the highest score of all 10. It makes me wonder if that's done to influence a particular company over another.
Well, I think that's a valid question, but I think part of it, and we see this with the HR interviews that we did yesterday, people have different breaks. And so it's not just one company that got a lower score, but it's the other score that was low as well. If you look at that, if we're going to really go apples to apples, then you have, is it fair to rank McGough as third place if they're receiving 92 points in a third place? I mean, then how much of a third place are they as well? And that's why in my opening comments, I said, I think we need to look at all components. You look at all of this based on the presentation, but we also look at fee structures.
And, and I think and that's a good argument. But so is the argument about when we originally did all these and all of the ones that we scored, in the original one, construction engineers and everybody came out high. They were the highest. even of going down to the final 3. This go-around, they would be the highest, with the exception of that one score by that one individual, out of 10 individuals. And then when we start talking about it, and the fees things are important. Don't get me wrong, the fee things are important, but some of the other components, when you start looking at the at risk and the ability to self-perform, has a significant factor that should be considered in these processes. And I believe there was only one of the 3 who said they do no self-performing. And for some reason, that one got the highest score of one individual. Self-performing is important. We've seen it in all of these projects that we've done to avoid time delays and to be able to have somebody step in the event of a subcontractor not being able to do it.
So curious, how did the score of the one person affect this one company being the highest out of the 3?
Well, if you took that one out, if you took that particular score out,
I'm talking cost.
well, I'm not talking about cost.
Right, but I think that's why I
But
said it's
overall,
part of all of it.
like Mr. Larson just said, the cost piece was 20% of the overall factors that we should be considering.
Right, well then when you look at the total scores of the individual companies, even with a high and low, which always happens in averages, that's why you do averages, you still have a 92 for one and only a 90.8 for the other.
But let me give you an example. The totals, 920 for Gertz, 908 for construction engineers. You take that one had a clear 29-point difference. Any other closest difference, I believe, was like 14 points.
I guess I wasn't aware that Steve said if your first place gets something, it only can be 3 points away from second. Did we ever say there has to be a certain breakdown? If an individual, all of the professionals that we brought in the room, that one person deserves something, that's what it is. But if you want to point out other people, then let's tell one of the professionals that their opinion is crap.
No, I'm just saying that one score was so far away from all other scores. What was the motive for that? I don't understand it, because I just don't understand it. So if I can finish my comment, so if you take that one score out, now construction engineers has 837 and Gertz has 820. The one score out of 10, if you're looking at the total score, and it would have changed that average of 92 to 90.8 if that difference wasn't so great. I'm kind of trying to defend construction engineers here, because I've had the experience of working with them on many projects, and I don't see how there should be a 29-point difference between them and another company on this who doesn't even self-perform.
Yes, Commissioner Ebinger.
I will agree with Commissioner Campbell on the fact we've had good experiences with construction engineers. I worked with them on a law enforcement center in the LEC, and they were impressive. And what I've seen from the juvenile center and the work they've done on the current project, the work's been adequate. I don't take umbrage to the scoring. People are going to be influenced by different factors, and I will be quite frank with you. I was skeptical about Gertz, and they came in and they did a very impressive presentation. My concern boiled down to two things. What kind of exposure has the county got by assuming the risk on this? And what we're seeing right here is that they're willing to do this at risk. And what's cost going to be? The other concern would be how reliable are they? I did not follow up intentionally on Joe's comments about talking to the operations director at Moorhead Schools about his experience, but I had occasion to talk to him about another matter, and I asked him what was his experience with Gertz Construction, and it reflects what Joe told us. He said that it was seamless, it went well, and these are projects much bigger than what we're looking at here. I do have some concerns about self-performance, but when you look at a project the size of Moorhead High School, the Career Academy, some of those things, that doesn't seem to have impacted on their ability to get the job done. So that left me with my other primary concern was, how much is this going to cost us? And I certainly, you look at the bottom line, they're considerably less than the other two that have put a bid in. So, you know, I am really surprised, but I see where a choice with Gertz would be a responsible thing to do for the taxpayers. I don't think with either of these companies we're going to be at risk of a failed project. But the bottom line is what's been quoted here is a lot less than the other two bids. Once you look at what Scott's put forward here, and I certainly trust his ability to work this fee schedule comparison out.
Thank you, Commissioner Ebinger. Other comments from the board? I would just like to clarify, I think it was said earlier in regards to motive, I think it's important that the board knows that, or the public knows, there's not a single thing that any individual of this board stands to gain from any decision. You know, I think the motive is what will the public get is a service, which is the detox. We've seen an entirely huge need for that, but at what price? And I think that's the motive of me, only speaking for me. I think that's important.
Just maybe just to touch on a couple different things in looking at and comparing the apples to apples piece. In the pre-construction, construction engineers in regards to, or in comparison to McGough and Gertz, used a percentage of the project, and so that was impacted there. Obviously, the fees on the project should be apples to apples as we're dealing with 11.5, and so you can see the difference in the percentages from our three options. And just also just identifying from a staffing component, from construction engineers is used the same staffing plan as they've utilized on all of our other projects, which in comparison to the other agencies, we have a field engineer and a part-time project manager that's different with construction engineers, and ultimately that's the difference. That's about $179,000 difference of that $189,000 from the lowest cost to the third option. So just wanted to clarify that or point that out as far as any differences between the three.
If I might add, I just want to point out when we talk about the fees as they're shown here in comparison to the total project cost, we're talking a difference of 0.1% is the difference here. And one significant change in a project can eat that up in a heartbeat, as we've seen. And again, you go back to the value of to me, the importance of self-performing. You can easily see, you know, one contractor walking away from the project for various reasons. And we've seen multiple times where, in this day and age, where that can happen, that all of a sudden these costs can rise. And and again, that 0.1%, that's a factor. And I want to give Gertz Construction credit for their work with Moorhead Public Schools and that system. But guess what? I'll bet you if they go through the process again with the school district, they're going to rank high with the school district because of their experience with the school district. And that's going to give them an advantage. We've had the experience with construction engineers, and it's been good. So why shouldn't there be credit given for that as well?
Fair comments. I think that that's probably reflected in some of the total scores that we did see. I think it's also important to note that it is apples to apples, but based on the 12-month estimate from one company, that would actually save $92,000 in fees, so that would change that 0.1% a bit as well. Any further questions? So Steve, you're looking for an approval to enter into contract negotiations with a company,
That's correct, Madam.
correct? And that would also then, I lost my thought. Does our architect have any comments on anything?
Scott, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well.
Okay.
I think you summed it up pretty well. Biggest difference in fees down to extra staff provided by construction engineers. So whether that extra staff on site is necessary or not, that would be up to the board to decide the level of service that you're looking for. But other than that, that was the biggest difference, really was in a field engineer, and that was most of the staff difference. So construction engineers was providing more staff in comparison to Gertz.
Okay.
Madam Chair, with the experience in mind from construction engineers, I would move that we authorize our administrator to move forward with a proposal with construction engineers.
Okay, we have a motion on the table, excuse me, from Commissioner Campbell to enter into contract negotiations for CMAR with construction engineers. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Do we have a second? The motion on the table dies for lack of a second. Board wishes.
I'll make a motion to go into contract with Gertz. I mean, we went through interviews, we did scoring, we did all the things that we're supposed to do, I guess, and they came out what I see the highest. I'll make a motion to get a contract with Gertz.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Gross to enter into contract negotiations with Gertz Construction. A second from Commissioner Ebinger. Is it fair to clarify, this is CMR, right? Commissioner Gross?
Well, according to the interview, they didn't talk about CMR, but
Well, they did. I don't want to wordsmith a motion too much, but I need to be clear. There was a proposal for both.
Okay, we'll include CMR.
CMAR.
Accept that.
Okay. Motion from Commissioner Gross, a second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? Commissioner Kaylee.
So I've been pretty quiet, but I walked in here thinking one thing this morning, and after looking at the data, GERT seems like the most fiscally responsible option. And so I just wanted to note that that's why I will be supporting that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? Colleen, can you do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Ebinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Campbell,
No.
Commissioner Mojo,
Aye.
Commissioner Gross,
Aye.
Commissioner Kaylee.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. I want to also say what great input we did have. We had fantastic presentations from great companies. We've certainly received amazing work from one of those companies as well. And it's just how this project ends up. So let us know how the negotiations go.
We'll do that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Anything else? So then the next component would be item 8, a request approval of architectural services addendum for the substance use crisis facility.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we've briefly touched on at different times over the last few weeks, the substance use crisis facility received state funding from Minnesota. As a part of that, in the initial discussions, Mr. Amundson and Ms. McKay and I had discussions with the state in regards to following federal requirements for both for Davis-Bacon and also B3 sustainable and energy efficiencies. When the GMP was presented before this board, Davis-Bacon was included, fees were included in that process, but based on the feedback that the state had provided, Mr. Amundson and Ms. McKay, it indicated that we did not have to follow that piece, and so therefore it was not included in the GMP estimate. Having said that, now the state has come back in reverse course. They have indicated that we do need to follow B3 requirements. Mr. Amundson, Ms. McKay, and also Mr. Fettig have had multiple conversations with the state of Minnesota looking for clarifications. And this morning we have 2 requests, an amendment to the original document with Klein McCarthy for additional pre-design work that needs to be completed to determine, number one, what B3 requirements are available to us and may have to be impacted or would be impacting our program. And so with that, I have Scott Fettig here on the line, Ryan Weber, and I also believe the B3 coordinator is also on the line for Klein McCarthy. And so Scott, maybe I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty good, Steve. When we initially went through the process with the Minnesota REX, Real Estate and Construction Services, the implication really was that B3 wasn't needed, but the pre-design was. When we really pinned them down over a couple other calls, what we're finding is that regardless if the state is giving out money, regardless of whether that's a state entity or a county entity, that entity must do the pre-design and must do the B3. We did have conversations with them again yesterday, and there may be some avenues for budget restrictions to not fully implement all of the aspects of B3, but in good faith, implement as much as you possibly can. So that might be one avenue to pull down the cost. But overall, when pressed on it, the state has said we must do the B3. Our contract, we hadn't included that because we were expecting, based on previous conversations with the county doing the research, that we weren't going to need to do B3. So we didn't include that in our contract. So I've got Ryan put together the pricing in our office with all of the different consultants, and we've got Dan Katzberger, who we put in as the B3 guideline leader. to manage our team and to submit. But basically, I think he can maybe go through a little bit of a summary of B3, but I think the overall misconception generally is that it really is more along the lines of solar panels, geothermal systems, and wind turbines, and it really focuses on that. But there are a lot of other site limitations, water infiltration. When you get into the building, it affects the selection for the windows, the amount of insulation in the building, the acoustical values in the building. So it does go deeper than just the HVAC systems and sustainable energy. So maybe with that, maybe Dan can give a little bit of an overview on the B3 process and what that entails for our team.
Sure. So first, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Dan Katzberger. I'm a professional mechanical engineer in the state of Minnesota. Also a B3 administrator and a lead certified consultant in new construction, homes, interior design and construction, and operations and maintenance of buildings. So I have a lot of experience in implementing both LEED and B3. So B3 is directly derived from the LEED, U.S. Green Building Council LEED rating system. And as was mentioned, it's a whole building rating system, and it does entail more than just energy efficiency. So energy efficiency is a big part of it, but there's also sections on indoor air quality. There's sections on kind of health of materials in the building. There's just general site guidelines. You know, how much parking is on the site, how much water infiltration is on the site, how much is going to be paved versus how much is going to be grass, and if it's going to be grass, how much is going to be native grass, and how much is going to be grass that needs to be maintained. And so there's just a lot of issues. It's a whole building and a whole sustainability viewpoint of the building. And then so the reason they brought me in or wanted to bring me on the project, because I have been through this process many times. And so as project teams go through this process, and especially as owners of buildings and contractors and subcontractors go through this process, sometimes for the first time, there's a lot of education that needs to happen, kind of just a lot of herding of the cats to keep everybody in line and keep everybody on track. And so I kind of have the experience in helping teams, project teams, and owners get through this process as quickly and as cheaply as possible. And then so I'll just say that's why they wanted to bring me on to help manage this process for this project. I'll stop there and open it up if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you. Any questions in this component? Any questions? Well, this is something that, one, we were hoping we could have a clear answer on this one sooner. This is something we've talked about at the detox subcommittee. It's one of those things that it's frustrating personally, that grant funds are awarded and then we're kind of hit later with this exorbitant cost that we never really got a clear answer on either way. I would hope that we can continue after this component seeking out additional grant funds, but at this point, and I don't know, Commissioner Gross, if you have anything to add, but this seems to be where we're at.
Well, my comment would just be, I mean, some of these, like the geothermal, that may be a better option to go to. I don't know. Couldn't we save money by using geothermal?
I think, Madam Chair, Commissioner Gross, and talking with Mr. Fettig, you know, the payback on geothermal, for example, if that were one of the items that came forward as this process, Mr. Fettig has indicated that payback can happen generally anywhere between 7 and 15 years, I believe, is what we talked about. And so there's a repayment on that piece. It would just be that there would be an upfront cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think with our analysis as we go through the process, all of the systems will certainly be reviewed and worked out and priced with your construction manager now that they're on board. So we certainly can analyze what the cost of geothermal would be, what its payback would be. Also look at solar panels, Wind turbines maybe doesn't make sense out there. It'll probably have a longer payback, but we'll do that as part of the analysis in all of the fees and with all of the B3 benchmarking we need to do. So we'll take a good hard look at that and see maybe there's a way that we can get energy credits and don't need to actually put the system out on your site. So that's certainly a possibility to look at if we can tap into another system that's available and get those credits. You just pay for those versus paying for a system. So that might be a less costly route.
And I think so, just a point of clarification for the board, essentially today you would be moving on 2 addendums. The cost of those addendums would not include the cost of what any recommendations would come forward. And so the B3 requirements would be an additional cost on top of that once that is found. And to Mr. Fettig's point, we don't know what that cost is going to be at this point. That's why we're having this amendment, so we're able to find that out. One of the things that we did talk about as the board, if you may or may not remember, as part of the GMP, there was a design contingency, a part of, it was about 5%, I believe, which was a little over $600,000. Again, there were reasons why that design was placed in there, and B3 was not one of them. But from a, I guess, one of the questions you'll probably ask, how are we going to pay for this? That is one of the areas that we could look at this time, with the understanding that there may be additional design costs that do supersede that total dollar amount. But for the time being, that would be an area where that funding could come from.
Well, certainly to get to the next step, this is something that we have to do. Again, we'll go back to the fact that I'm frustrated that they gave us a $5 million grant with strings that were not included in the initial cost estimates and all of that. It's just, frankly, I wish we could be spending an additional $250,000 on helping the mental health of the people that we're serving, which is just the backwards way government works sometimes, but this is where we're at. Board.
Move approval of the addendum.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Kaylee,
Second.
second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? Commissioner
I
Campbell.
just want to point out, if just the studying it is $249,000, I can't imagine what the impact is going to be to the cost of this project. We better be going to the bank,
Yeah,
I
maybe
think.
Dan can go into some detail. Yeah, if it was LEED certified, typically what we're hearing is that can be another 20% of the construction value. We anticipate that to be much less for the B3, and especially if we can get the credits included in that. Geothermal system, just based on another project we're doing in Elbow Lake, we're looking at a geothermal system. The building's about half your size, and that's about $190,000. So if you did just geothermal for your building, is probably about $400,000. So that's probably the bulk of B3. The rest of it ends up coming into some of the acoustics, water infiltration, thermal characteristics, but the bulk of it usually that we've been seeing is in that sustainability geothermal or solar system. Dan, maybe you want to clarify on that or tag on?
Yeah, I can just say that in general, when the process starts way back in pre-design, you can do B3 or LEED without having additional construction costs, depending on what level of B3 or LEED you're going for. When a project's had some design done or some pre-design and it's kind of on a path, and you have to go back and redesign, that does cost more, and it sometimes does add cost to the project. But there's always choices to be made, right? And that's part of what my role is, to figure out what options are there, and then what paths can we use to move forward. So geothermal is certainly a path that will help on the energy efficiency. So that will reduce operational costs. And even though there's a payback, on the long term, this is going to be a long-term building, a long-term facility. it will have an NPV positive, positive IRR to the county for going with that decision. Even though it costs more now, it will save in the long run. And so we'll be looking at all of that. The other thing we'll be looking at, I mean, there's the Inflation Reduction Act, there are monies, and even though a lot of those monies are for places to pay taxes, there are incentives for contractors and installers and folks that are doing this work. So we will also be looking at how we can reduce costs by potentially bringing in monies from federal programs that might now be applicable to this project that weren't applicable before the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment Act.
And I appreciate you clarifying it, and I think it's important. We have sought out a hardship waiver. I mean, we've pulled that, and part of why I think we still should is because in the memo it says, due to receiving state grant well, initially the state indicated Clay County would not, and subsequently the design of the crisis use facility did not incorporate the B3, but now the state has reversed their course. And so they just can change their mind whenever they want, and now we need to come up with a design on it. It is true that, and as maybe Commissioner Gross did say, his church did geothermal and it is paying off, and maybe it's something up front we're paying for, and we'll just have to see. But yes, Commissioner Ebinger.
One of the differences, and this is before I came on this board, I noticed about Clay County from other local governmental entities I have been involved with, is they're a little more forward-looking. And not just because this is environmentally sound, but if we can look at long-range savings and long-range payback, it still doesn't mean we don't need to lobby like the devil to get the state to pick up more of a piece of this, or find grant opportunities that will assist us in this, and partners that will assist us in this. But if we can pick a course that's going to have a long-term payback, 10 years from now, we'll have people in these chairs, hopefully newer ones, that are impressed with what we've done. And right now, when I look at some of the decisions we have to make, it's obvious there's been several decades of good decisions being made by this group and by the staff of the county. So it's a little irritating, but it's not without hope that we can streamline this and get a resolution to our problem here.
Commissioner Kaylee.
Yes, I agree, Commissioner Ebinger. I hope too that as a part of these discussions, when we look at where's the long-term return going to be for our county in these investments, that we also take a look at the lifespan of some of these systems that we're planning to incorporate. Does a geothermal system last longer than a solar system? What's the replacement cost down the road? What's the impact on our waste streams from whatever we choose? So one of my big passion areas is the environment, and so it's really important that we protect what we have and that we make good decisions for sustainability. And even though I agree this is really annoying that the state reversed course on this, and this is going to end up costing significantly more than we had initially planned, I think it is going to push us to make some good decisions for the legacy of this project. Thanks.
Yes. Any other questions from the board? Wishes.
I move that we enter into an addendum for architectural services with Klein McCarthy to address B3.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Ebinger.
Second, did we not do that already?
Madam Chair, we
did that
have,
yesterday.
we're in discussion. We had
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Commissioner
write that down.
Kaylee made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Ebinger.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we're there.
Yeah.
I
Good, we still agree.
apologize for that. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. We now are scheduled for a 5-minute break. Come back at 10 o'clock. Okay, we are back in session. Item 10 today would be a request to support Red River Communications Reconnect Grant application for federal broadband funding. The CEO, Tom Steinhoffson, and the marketing strategist, Kari Kleingartner. I saw
You think just one?
Kleingartner was on the teams. Yeah. Do we need, we might need to take a little bit of a break while we re-up that one.
Colleen, did you send him the link?
No?
Okay, well then, let's wait on item 10 and go to 11. Anna? The request 3,500 embedded health deductible increase. Good morning.
Good morning. I thought I was done for the year, but of course, we're back with another insurance item. So when I was here a couple months ago with our 2023 renewal, I presented it as is, and before I signed the contract, I thought I found what was a typo in our 3,500 health insurance deductible. In fact, it was not a typo. The IRS is increasing our $3,500 deductible by $250 so that we can remain in compliance with an HSA and an embedded health plan. So our 3,500 plan currently has an embedded deductible as well as a fourth quarter carryover. And to keep that feature, we have to index the deductible by $250. So with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Okay, questions on this piece? Has this been through the insurance committee?
Oh, yes, I apologize. The insurance committee did meet last Friday, and they did vote unanimously to support this.
Board? Either of you that are on that committee have comments?
I'll move to include it.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Gross to approve the request,
Second.
and a second from Commissioner Ebinger. Commissioner Campbell?
Yeah, this also allows them to keep the fourth quarter carryover, I think it's.
Correct. So increasing the deductible by $250 would keep our current plan design, meaning that we would keep the fourth quarter carryover and the embedded deductible.
Anything else? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Carried. Item 12 is are we still waiting on Red River?
I sent them a message, but have not heard back.
Okay,
from them.
thank you. Just let us know if you hear anything before the end of the meeting, but we will move then into item 12, which is the request to set the preliminary levy per statute with adoption of Resolution 2022-28. We have our County Administrator, Steve Larson, and County Auditor Treasurer, Lori Johnson. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. As you mentioned, before you this morning for consideration is Resolution 2022-28. If approved, this does two important things. One, it sets the minimum levy amount that our citizens would be assessed for the upcoming budget cycle. And it would also allow Ms. Johnson to certify the preliminary levy, certify that levy by October 1st, which is a statutory requirement. As a reminder for many of our citizens, once a preliminary budget's been set, that budget can only be reduced. It cannot be increased prior to setting that budget in December. Citizens have the opportunity to participate in the process of providing input on our budget. That's going to happen through our resolution in Truth and Taxation, which would be requesting to schedule for December 13th at 6 p.m. We'll having some other discussions later in my committee updates about moving our board meeting. The board highly values the impact that our citizens have provided throughout the years. And so they look forward to that feedback. We do like to highlight each year, both here during our Board of Equalizations and also at Truth and Taxation, that our time for Truth and Taxation is to talk about the overall budget, not for individual property assessments or valuations. That process started back in April at our local Board of Equalizations and Appeals, and anyone that was not satisfied with the input there came before you in June. So just a reminder, our budget process started back in May with our department heads and external agencies receiving their budgets and information packets. They had roughly 4 weeks to get that information and compiled and sent to Lori. Lori then she and I met with each department, and we went line through their budgets, and they were then brought forward to present before this board. On September 6th, we were last here. We provided this board with a budget overview that included half-cent sales tax information through August. We continued to see higher than anticipated collections through that process. 2022 is the first year that sales tax has covered the entire cost of the principal interest payments for the correctional facility and law enforcement center, and therefore we've been able to remove that from our budget process. We also talked about the expenses year-to-date through August. We reviewed all the new requests. Those new requests have been included in your packet if there's any questions or clarifications needed. And we also talked about the fund balance changes from 2020 to 2021. We also received a summary of funds at that time. What's made this budget process a little bit unique in comparison to other years is that generally we have 9 bargaining units, and generally we have a contract assigned with at least one of those. This year we did not have that, and so we did not have a COLA that was a part of that initial sheet. When we came through the resolution 2022-28, it's really a culmination of this budget process and taking into the feedback of where historically you would like to be as a board, and also feedback that you provided last week in utilizing revenues, fund balances to buy down or purchase down the levy. So with that, I would have you take a look at the summary of the tax levy by funds. Just for your feedback or for your information, going back, the information on the top fund area did not change. And so unless you had any additional specific questions with the funding areas, I'll put the focus down in the blue tax levy area. Again, the new requests over the last couple of weeks, based on the board's feedback and approval, we brought a number of the new requests through ARPA funding, which brought that new request line to $562,964. Based on the discussion and direction from this board, we are proposing a 4% COLA for 2023. And the utilization of $1.35 million or $1,350,000 of fund balance from previous years. That would bring a total levy to $44,632,484, or a 5.08% increase. When you look at when you take the total levy minus the program aid, will be provided next year of $4,093,206. That brings us a spread levy of $40,539,278, or a 5.19% increase. When we look at the new construction percentage that we have for next year, we have an offset of 1.2%, which would bring a net levy increase of 3.99% for your consideration. I would note, in addition to the new request, this does include $200,000 for future insurance decisions that may need to be made by the board. As you recall, last year during this meeting, you also set aside $200,000 from the 2020 budget, and so this would this would provide a $400,000, one, to either, as we look at self-insurance, or as we respond to the increase when we do an RFP for insurance services in, in 3 years. Or we're on the first year or second year of 7% increase. Next year, we're looking at an 8% increase, and the following year, a 9% increase. Had we not had a contract for insurance this year at 7%, we were notified we would have been at a 35% increase. And so that was why the actions of this board at least talked about looking forward to making those decisions. So with that, I would yield for any questions.
Okay. Thank you for the update. Board questions? Questions, Commissioner Campbell?
Just a couple of comments. I know there are some challenges that we've had to deal with too that are kind of hidden in here. I think back to the change in our contracts at the jail or correctional facility in terms of health coverage there. That was an extensive increase between that and the Regional Juvenile Center. There's other factors. I think this is well done here. But my question, just so that everybody is aware that, if we hadn't taken this $1.3 million in reserves, that total levy would be $45,902,000, not $44,600,000, and that would have been an 8.2% increase before new construction, which would have brought it down to 6.5. My question goes to, because again, I don't necessarily like kicking the can down the road either. So next year when we start this process, what number are we going to see as last year's number? Are we going to see the 44, or are we going to see the 45.9 as our starting number?
You'll see the 44.
Okay. Okay, I was hoping it wouldn't be the 45.9.
Only the 44.
Okay.
Board questions? Commissioner Kaylee?
On that fund balance piece, pulling that money from reserves, can you talk a little bit about the sustainability of doing that as a practice? Is this a one-year thing? What impact is that going to have in the future?
Well, I think that I know that utilizing fund balance is a practice that this board would prefer not to utilize. I know that generally when you have done that, you've done it in years in which there's been revenues over expenditures from the previous years. You've utilized that. The taxpayers have already been asked to provide that funds, and so that has been generally the practice. From our standpoint, last year was a little bit of a different year. We purposely or knowingly had expenses that were going to provide us to show a loss or expenses over revenues. But having said that, Lori and I have had a number of conversations through this process and feel that the $1.35 million does put us in an acceptable position. Doesn't put us at any risk.
Board questions? I think because we are in negotiations on some of the COLA pieces, I want all of those for the next year to come out of reserves. So just making sure that would be reflective. Granted, this is a preliminary, I understand that.
Madam Chair, maybe just one more comment for the public that might be listening. And we set aside $200,000 towards self-insurance down the road. When we were at AMC recently, that's the Association of Minnesota Counties, which is our professional organization. I had multiple conversations where other counties brought up, without me asking, about going self-insured and the benefits that has provided for their county. So I still feel really positive about that, and I'm glad that we are taking action to set that money aside so that we'll be ready to do that should we decide to make that decision in a few years.
Commissioner Gross, did you have a comment?
No.
Comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the levy at 3.99.
A motion from Commissioner Gross to approve the preliminary levy at 3.99%.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? Well, Steve, you brought it up before Commissioner Campbell did, but in terms of the revenues over expenditures, I'm hoping as we get closer to the final levy in December, we have a better solid number on what that was for the year. Certainly, this is a living, breathing budget as well. Thank you for the work that it's taken for us to get to this point. I know you would do a lot of meetings before the proposals come to this board, so thank you for the work on that. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
Thank you.
The next item is committee reports. Commissioner Ebinger, you were through, correct? Yes. Thank you. Commissioner Campbell?
I have 2 weeks because I was out of town last week. So on September 13th, we had a highway tracking committee meeting, and I'm sure Commissioner Gross probably did an update on that. And I think the main thing was the issues related to the shops and the where the status on those, as well as some discussion about the 5-year plan. The Century Link issue, I think, is the right-of-way issues have been resolved, and that process on County Road 1 is moving forward. Then on the 21st, we had a Building Improvement Committee meeting. The Comstock one with the environmental issue is looking to be complete around November 1st, after the soil mitigation is complete. The Georgetown project, the pour was concrete, will be done. It will be ready in mid-October for the building. And the Ulen project, the Morton building, will not be coming in this year. The site work, poles, and everything else will be ready. But again, it's an issue about availability of product that can have an influence on everything. We had some other updates too on current projects that are in the works, just status reports. On the 22nd, we had a Moore Clay County Joint Powers meeting. We did approve 8 just compensation appraisals on 8 parcels. Those were negotiated amounts, so those will, based on those negotiations, that will be 8 more that will now be complete on the Minnesota side of the river. I believe that's all in the report on that. That same day, we had a Diversion Authority Board Authority meeting. Commissioner Ebinger commented on that. And, we did have some discussion about the LOMAR process. There were some questions by people about when will flood insurance change, and when will this project be able to impact whether someone has flood insurance or not. And obviously that will not happen until the project is complete. And even once that is complete, it'll probably be a 2-year process before people will be able to see that benefit of no flood insurance. The diversion inlet is about 87% complete. The wild rice control structure is 64% done. The I-29 road raise is 58% done. The Reach 4 in Minnesota contract is anticipated in 2024. And so for those interested, Reach 4 is the area of the tieback levy on the Minnesota side. So right now the time frame for that is the Corps will award that in the year 2024.
Excuse me.
Then on the 23rd, we had the insurance meeting, and the single item of discussion was the change in the 3,500 plan deductible to 3,750. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. Commissioner Gross.
Commissioner Campbell covered the only meeting that was at the Building Improvement Committee. The only thing there, we did discuss some more updates for the Family Service Center that they're going to be, that Joe's going to be doing. Also looking at the future for the detox center, if that, once that gets vacated in a couple of years, what the plans will be for that, and also the future, we start discussing as far as the motor vehicle department, what we're gonna do there, once we find out for sure whether we got the space or not, or how that's gonna go, and Roar starts developing that. So those are the only additions I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Gross. Commissioner Kaylee.
Tuesday last week, our Adult Mental Health Local Advisory Council met. We had Representative Heather Keeler join us for that discussion. We had our local agencies and social services and other providers and consumers talk about some of the barriers that they're experiencing to providing and receiving services. Kristen Wagenest from our Social Services Department shared that we would like the state to consider funding more inpatient psychiatric beds, especially for when the individual doesn't meet criteria for hospitalization. This has come before our board multiple times when we have somebody who's been in a hospitalization setting and then they're ready for that step down in care. As soon as that determination is made, the county is responsible for 100% of their stay, which can be around $1,700 a day, depending on the facility that they're at. So that very quickly adds up for our taxpayers, but also we need to ensure the safety and continued care of our residents as well. We also discussed the need for a locked IRTS facility. IRTS would be intensive residential treatment services. There are none in the state that are locked. We would need costs for recruiting, training staff, and bricks and mortar. So with the increase in high acuity of needs that we're seeing statewide, this is an area that we're not able to address as a state. And so we're having to send folks other places or find other solutions that may not be the best possible solution for that person. We need funding to support workforce sustainability. I mean, we hear that in so many different industries, but it's a huge issue in the mental health sphere. Of particular poignancy, the group, and this is all agencies, not social services, said that personal care assistants are exceptionally hard to come by. There's an organization in Minnesota that can hire family members to be personal care assistants, but there's just a ton of barriers for that particular system. And the reason why personal care assistants are so necessary is a lot of times when you have somebody with a mental illness, this is what helps them to stay in their home, stay functional, stay stable where they're at, so that we don't, we can avoid hospitalizations if at all possible. We also need funding to support housing needs. There's housing instability leads to increased stress, leads to increased incidences of those high acuity mental health situations where we have to step in and provide more services for those folks. And so if we could work on our affordable housing programs to provide housing to individuals that are low income, that are receiving disability waivers. And we also had a conversation too with the disability. The state of Minnesota recognizes mental illness as a disability, a lot of them. But when you do the needs assessment, the state needs assessment, it is significantly weighted towards those with physical disabilities and not necessarily mental illness related disabilities. And so those in that group have found that it's hard to get that disability waiver for mental illness. So there's potentially some work to be done there as well. CCRI talked about the need for increased funding for community-based mental health services. And so they're talking about adult aftercare. So that would be intensive short-term case management for recently hospitalized folks or those at risk of hospitalization. They currently have a state grant, which is on a 2-year cycle. There also has been no rate increase for ARMS, which is Adult Rehabilitative Mental Health Services. That's only been increased once in the last 16 years. So a lot of our folks needing a lot of support that would be in that, receiving that ARMS care, those agencies providing that care are kind of spinning their wheels, trying to do more with less, and more with less, and more with less, and more with less every year. They're not able to offer a competitive wage, and the estimate was that they're under by about $6 an hour compared to others in the region for those services. Mobile mental health with Lakeland talked about the need for a crisis stabilization unit. We don't have anywhere in our county to bring people. And that leads to a myriad of problems, which we've discussed with this board as well. So it was great to have Representative Keeler there to hear these things. So this was the Adult Mental Health Local Advisory Council. She had also attended the Children's Mental Health Local Advisory Council, and there was some definite overlap in the issues brought up at those meetings. And I look forward to continuing to work with her. She's interested in writing some legislation to get out there right away in January. And we'll be working closely with Rhonda Porter and Social Services and other agencies to identify what those biggest needs are and how to address that with the legislature. So I will keep you posted on those conversations as they go forward. On Wednesday, the 21st, I attended the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County meeting. We had a presentation from Dr. Amanda Butler at MSUM. She presented some of the findings of the archaeological digs that students in the field school, archaeology field school, have been doing at Winnipeg Junction. Winnipeg Junction was once a thriving town in Clay County in the early 1900s. The railroad moved away from that space, and eventually the town unincorporated, and most of the buildings were moved. But it's an interesting piece of Clay County history. So students were digging pits behind Ole Goal's Saloon and the Johnson Restaurant looking for a garbage pit. They found a variety of bottles, ceramic crockery, medicine bottles, solid state batteries from the railroad, some of the earliest solid state batteries. That was really interesting. Heel of a lady's shoe, game pieces, and more. So all of these items that the students are finding give us a better picture of what was happening in the everyday life of folks in that town and in that location. This archaeological field school that we have with MSUM is a nationally recognized program. It's an amazing thing that we have here. Usually undergrads don't get to do this kind of work You usually have to wait till you're a master's or doctoral student in this field. So the fact that we are providing that here at one of our schools in Clay County is really something to be proud of. We also just had some normal business and reports from staff and looked at our audit, which was complete. Thursday, the 22nd, I attended the CAP LP board meeting. We had a report from housing, and I am always amazed at the number of funding streams that Community Action Partnership manages in housing to find the best resources possible for folks that are coming in looking for help. They do a fantastic job, but the needs are huge. And as I mentioned in the mental health meeting, housing was mentioned there. It's going to come up again in my next report, is one of my next reports as well. So that's something that we as a board might want to have a conversation about. What are the housing needs? MetroCog was supposed to be doing a housing assessment, I believe. Maybe Jenny, have you, Chair Mojo, if you have had any updates on that or when we would expect a report on that, I would be interested. Finance Committee report, we had approved the Head Start annual report to the community, approved a rural homelessness grant application and an unsheltered homelessness grant application as well in that meeting. On Friday, the 23rd, Commissioner Ebbinger reported on the conversation we had about our community opioid response. There were representatives in that meeting from the Red River Recovery Initiative, which has been going on for a couple years. And that is made up of partners on both the North Dakota side of the river and the Minnesota side of the river. They have a strategic plan. So far, they've identified decreasing opioid overdose and death, the lack of, I have RCO, Recovery Community Organizations, probably, and Narcan administration as big areas to tackle. We also identified at that meeting that we just don't have good information for this side of the river. If you look to see what our overdose incidences and deaths are on the Minnesota side, they were saying it shows 0 because our hospitals are in North Dakota. And so those are being reported as incidences in Fargo when in fact they happened on this side of the river. So there's some work to be done with law enforcement and other agencies to figure out who's reporting and to where and to how and how to access that information. So they said tracking, reporting, and training are big areas to tackle on this side of the river. So that tracking piece, how many overdoses are happening? What is the real picture? How is that being reported? And then there are lots of requests for training on Narcan administration. It was shared that MSUM has requested to train all of their staff in Narcan administration, and they want kits. That's a huge ask. Moorhead Housing Authority and Clay County Housing Authority has also asked for training and kits. And so far, the Lotus Center, Kyle Christensen with the Lotus Center has been doing that training kind of as a passion project, but those are some really big asks. We also heard that Fargo Cass Public Health has been funding a lot of this work to the tune of $46,000 annually. And that is getting a little old for them. So they're looking to see what investment we would have in tackling this coming from this side of the river. So that's part of what spurred this conversation, bringing the Minnesota folks together with Representative Keeler, Public Health, Essentia Health, Lotus Center, Commissioner Ebinger, and myself to see what we might want to do, what those partnerships might be, and how that would look. So more on that as that develops. Related, so I'll jump ahead to yesterday. I attended the Moorhead Business Association nonprofits meeting because they were meeting at the rec center, which is operated by the Lotus Center. So again, that's our substance use treatment. The rec is short for Recovery Engaged Community. They reported that 1/4 of the deaths in the U.S. are substance abuse related, and that substance abuse is not a moral failing, it is a disease. And so the rec is a space for folks to come and be a part of a community. They're a harm reduction community of support and engagement for sustained recovery. And they shared about their vision for a dry social club situation, and just providing some of that after hours community connection that a lot of folks are needing. Treatment is one piece, but also being engaged with a community of support to sustain your recovery is another piece. On Friday, I missed the insurance meeting because I had an opportunity to meet with Governor Walz, and so I snagged that instead. I talked to him about a lot of our public health and social services priorities that I have reported on before, but some of those include the need for mental health beds in our county and the western part of the state. How Minnesota is not a nursing compact state and how that leads to struggles for us trying to hire nurses for a lot of our needs on this side of the river, because that North Dakota license is not recognized here, and we can copy and paste that to other professional licensures, particularly in the mental health sphere. We also talked about the backlog of background studies getting through DHS. So we're trying to hire people and it takes weeks to get a background study through and they can't start. That leads to problems hiring for a lot of our departments. Fingerprinting is another topic, and the need for childcare as well. I will be following up with his staff on a number of those issues, but I appreciate him taking the time to listen. Saturday, I attended the Welcoming Week International Potluck that we were all invited to, put on by Cultural Diversity Resources. That was really fun to gather with those folks and share the excitement about having them in our community and to learn about their food and their culture and the joy that they bring here. That concludes my reports. Thank you.
I'd like to entertain a motion to remove item 10 from the agenda today. They are not able to make it.
So move.
Second.
Commissioner Gross, a second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I think that it's good. The only thing that I question here, maybe there's a reason that they couldn't be here, and they're asking for support in broadband funding, and I don't know if it's time sensitive, where they have to have these things submitted and the letter of support submitted in a timely way. And I see no reason why we could not or should not act on that. And the more I think about it, in terms of the support, provided that sometimes when you put support in, they're asking for the potential for a financial commitment, which we wouldn't be ready to do. But as long as there's nothing in terms of financial support, I'm wondering if we shouldn't just support their efforts. They did come to us before and explain what they wanted to do, didn't they, Steve?
They did. Madam Chair, Commissioner Campbell, I'm not sure if this is, I'm assuming it's a separate grant application, but yes, they did come before us.
Okay. And again, I don't know if it's time sensitive is all, so.
Well, I did reach out to Colleen through, to make sure she connected with them, and they were not joining. Or there was, in the short email that you got back, was there an intent to further the request, or was it just that we did not make it today?
It was just that they did not make it today, but they have pulled off a couple other agendas last minute and have been difficult to correspond with.
Okay.
Okay, and I would,
I thought the reason, for me, I have no problem entertaining it on a further agenda. I didn't want to table it because we didn't have a specific date in mind, but doing this, well,
I think they can request to get back on again.
okay, so your motion would stand, same with the second. Appreciate the comments. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Last week, I attended the Planning Commission meeting. We did have 4 items on the agenda. We did have a interim use permit for a home occupation in Park Township for a lawn care business. That permit was approved with no concerns. The second piece was a conditional use permit for a egg service establishment and animal processing facility in Glendon Township. That certainly we did have great input and concerns from neighbors. The commission felt like we were able to mitigate those concerns through conditions. There still are a lot of permitting processes that need to go through in order for that to start up. I really want to stress to citizens, if they ever feel like someone who has received a permit is not following the conditions of the permit, that's part of the reason this board supported adding another position in the planning and zoning department to make sure we're following up on those. That's something that we feel really strongly about. So citizens do have that option to continue to work with our planning department. So that did pass. The next was a request from interim use permit for a food truck and catering business in southern Clay County in Scree Township. If you're on your way to the lake, there's a food truck that has phenomenal food, but that did pass, working with the concerns of the sheriff's department and highway department. And the next was a request for a platted subdivision, major subdivision in Tansem Township. That was a unanimous recommendation to this county board of the support. It's a 9-lot subdivision in eastern Clay County. So that will be coming to this board for future discussion at a later date. I also attended the MCC JPA meeting that Commissioner Campbell reported on. We did have the property acquisition status reports and talked about the biogeo monitoring. We did, as he noted, approve some acquisition components and the relocation reimbursement reviews. But the one item of note is one of the properties that the MCC JPA did acquire is currently in Conservation Reserve Program, CRP program. There's only a year left on that contract. We did vote unanimously to continue with that contract. Revoking that contract would then require revocation of the funds that were distributed to the prior owner on that. So we did vote to move forward with that, and then did approve the recommendation of a nominal increase to farmland rental rates for 2023. Yesterday, I attended the Lakeland Mental Health Board meeting in Fergus Falls. We did have a look back on the 2019, 2020, 2021, and 22 monthly margins, and it is good to note that programs in the black are continuing to stay steady, and that the margins are continuing to stay positive, not all over the board, but certainly a positive march upward, which has been helpful. We had outpatient services supervisor presentations. Those outpatient services cover the services that we have partnered with for our correctional facility. There's home visits. Those visits have happened in homes, but also with people's concern because of the pandemic have happened outside and in parks, and continue to happen in schools. 20 schools across the area of Lakeland's coverage area currently have service providers in them, and all ages are being served. We had some heartbreaking stories that have turned into heartwarming because of the relationships that those service providers are building in the therapy services with those people that they serve. And DBT, which is the dialectic behavioral therapy, which is a rare service offered not only in Minnesota but in the Midwest. That's something Lakeland continues to provide. So it's quite an asset. And then we did have updates from the centers. As you recall, they are expanding the Moorhead site down in southern Moorhead. They are in the ground right now and hoping to move forward with that. And the jail, this is going back on the service piece, the jail served 373 individuals in the Lakeland, under the Lakeland contract last year, and that equates to about 1,500 hours. And so as this board continues to decipher spending in areas where we focus, this one is really one that is continues to prove worthwhile. And that could not be successful without the partnership of our correctional facility staff and Lakeland. And also, I don't have the numbers, but also going into the juvenile center, that's been quite worthwhile. And then, apologize. Yesterday, Commissioner Campbell and I were part of interviews for the county coordinator position, and a recommendation to that will be coming soon. And that concludes my reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last Tuesday, or 21st, I met with James O'Donnell in regards to a series of things at the juvenile center. I believe that he'll be coming forward here with some positive news. They've been very successful in applying for grants, and so I believe that he'll be coming forward with a request to accept a grant that would positively impact his budget for this year and for next year. We had a department evaluation later that morning. That afternoon, met with Scott Fettig, Ryan Weber, in regards to the B3 issues that were addressed this morning. Also participated that afternoon in the building committee, what's been addressed by Commissioner Gross, Commissioner Campbell. Thursday, we had board prep with Colleen. We had negotiation discussions with Darren Brook and Josh Hagum. We, that afternoon, had participated in the MCC JPA meeting that's been covered by Commissioner Mojo and Commissioner Campbell. Also met with Lori Johnson in regards to the levy discussion that we had today. On the 23rd, I met with Commissioner Cayley, Commissioner Emberger in regards to the meeting that they had. They reported on earlier in regards to meeting with representatives from Lotus and the city officials. Insurance committee on the 23rd, that was on the board's agenda. Yesterday, I also participated in the communication coordinator interviews. We're hoping to have a candidate brought forward soon. Just a clarification, we continue to find out more information on the opioid settlement. AMC has been spearheading this from the beginning, but has been a little bit challenged and frustrated with some of the information that we've got. I think I reported last week that we would be receiving $67,619, and then maybe be receiving multiple distributions this year. It was later clarified that that was part of the settlement was with Janssen and also with the distributors. That was the distributor portion. And so we're going to be finding out in the near future what the Janssen or Johnson & Johnson funding amount will be. And that is the one that's going to be paid over the 3 to 5 years. And so we'll keep the board up to date there. Two, just with the board's action on selecting Gertz Construction, maybe just get some additional direction and feedback. If you guys recall from our interview process, while the CM at risk was our preferred method of what this board chose to do, Mr. Gertz presented on that, but also indicated that he felt CM agency was an opportunity that would work well in this project. I'm anticipating that Mr. Gertz would ask me what the board's wishes are. Is there any flavor from this board to in that negotiations process to have information brought forward on both CMA or CMAR?
Okay. I think that goes back, and I apologize if I missed that, but I think that goes back to Commissioner Cayley's question in regards to the process as to how we chose that. Comments? Commissioner Ebbinger?
I don't see where a comparison, a side-by-side, would be harmful. I'm not comfortable with the county being at risk, but if there's a substantial savings, that's something we might at least want to have some solid numbers we can kick around and see what thoughts are on this. And if he has any other pertinent information. I mean, it was said during the presentation that the presentation expressed that they preferred the agency at risk and that it never presented a problem in the past. If there could be something more substantive than that that we need to hear, I mean, it doesn't hurt to talk about it.
Okay. Questions or comments?
All right.
Direction or?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Points of view?
I don't know, I feel if the company feels that they're okay with the CMA, if they think they can handle it, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think as part of the negotiation process, personally, I see no concern with that. This board still has the authority to choose if it's a negotiation component. They still were in my concern, they were still the best valued company, and if we were able to get further value by going CMA, I have no concern. Commissioner Campbell or Kaylee, do you have comments?
No.
Okay. Okay. So that's.
Thank you for the directives. I also just wanted to clean up a few different things. During our budget presentation, we established a Truth and Taxation meeting to be December 13th at 6 p.m. Historically, as a board, you have also moved then the board meeting from 8:30 to 5 p.m. on that day. And so I'd be looking for your feedback on that. And also, since we're cleaning up board meetings, the AMC annual conference will be held over our December 6th meeting. In the past years, we have shifted we have a 5th Tuesday in November, which would be November 29th. From an auditor's treasurer standpoint, going 2 weeks for our budget is a challenge, and so the motion or we would be looking forward would be to shift our board meeting from December 6th to December 29th, same time, 8:30, and then shifting our board meeting on December 13th from 8:30 to 5 p.m.
I'll move to that.
Motion offered from Commissioner Gross.
Second.
Do they need to be separate motions, or can we?
I don't believe so.
Brian, they're okay to have the same?
We're moving December 6th to November 29th, and then moving to December 13th to 5 o'clock.
That's correct.
5 o'clock or 5:30?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Student taxation at 6.
A motion from Commissioner Gross. Oh, Commissioner Kaylee has a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
That concludes
Okay,
my
and then
report.
just item of note, it's not on the agenda, but it is advertised. There is an opportunity for the full board to experience a tour of the Terracon precast facility in rural Clay County on Friday. That is advertised. How is it advertised? That their caravan will happen, or that?
Yes, Madam Chair, there's a caravan, and that the tour will start at 10:30.
I don't have it in front of me.
That's this Friday, or?
This Friday, yes.
So it was meeting somewhere in Moorhead and then riding out together?
If you so wished, yes, you could ride.
Perfect. As now, it says that leaving at 9:30, leaving from the government center, going to the Terracon facility for the tour to start after. Okay?
Leaving at 9:30.
Leave at 9:30.
9:30. Okay, anything else? If not, we are adjourned.